Take a seat.
You have read what Bernanke says. He thinks 2010 it will recover. I don't know. Many economists say he's got to say that to cheer everybody up. But he will lose credibility, and he does not want to do that. I cannot tell you what's going to happen. I can say, look, the optimistic scenario is 2-3 years we're out of this. At the worst, 4, 5, 6 years. As the IMF said, and the World Bank, Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan are going to be hit. Why? Because we are export dependent. Our imports and exports are the highest in the world as a percentage of GDP. 330 to 40% of our GDP. Hong Kong is 275%. So when the trade shrinks and PSA volumes go down, cargoes go down by, air cargo goes down by 23%, you know that we are going to shrink. But when the recovery takes place, we are going to bounce back. So I get economists saying, you got to change your system. Wall Street Journal says, this doesn't work. Consume yourself. 4 million people to consume and keep an industry that supplies the world with top-end goods is rubbish. It's just clever editors typing away. And when we answer, there's no comeback. So the best case scenario is this cooperation continues, the world will prosper, and if we don't prosper, then we are stupid. We got an FTA with America, Japan, China, India. China is almost done already. India. And Australia, New Zealand thrown in for extra benefits. And we got good links with the Gulf states who will not be affected by any downturn because they got huge reserves. The pessimistic scenario, of course, is clash between the major powers. A new kind of, probably a more dangerous, Cold War. Who with? Between America and her allies, and China and her allies. America knows there's only one country that can challenge her, and that's China. Where will Japan and the EU be? The European Union, I think, with America, because their economy, their politics are so intricately interwoven with America. Where will India be? I think India may well be neutral, because she does not want to be a dependent or a sidekick of anybody. Where will Russia be? I think Russia will be with anybody who's against America as of present. So that does not make for a prosperous world. More armaments, more suspicion, we won't prosper so much. What will be the eventual outcome? I think something in between the optimistic and the pessimistic scenario. That's the broader world. Next, we've got to look at our immediate neighborhood, East Asia. China, Japan, Korea, India, ASEAN. I put ASEAN last because at present our trade with these big countries is more than our trade with ASEAN. But if ASEAN takes off with this ASEAN Charter, then the ASEAN economic community becomes a reality. And nobody says, no, I'm opting out. Like Malaysia said about their proton car, they told the Thais, no, not this year, next year. And next year, because proton can't compete with Thailand's multinational companies. They're producing almost any spare part cheaper than what Malaysia can do. But I think sooner or later, all the 10 countries in Southeast Asia will realize that unless we combine our markets, we are going to be sidelined. Are we going to allow ourselves to be sidelined? No. Therefore, we have these FTAs with America, Japan, China, India, Australia, New Zealand, and with ASEAN. So the Malaysians said, no, you are breaking ranks. But once we had an FTA with America, they also want to have an FTA with America. And the Americans say, well, then you've got to stop this pre-Bumi for all tenders. It must be open to competition. They can't do it, so they're stuck. But sooner or later, as you have read from the newspapers, their economist and Najib Razak's brother is in the banking business, and he says, this legislation to give, imposing on all corporations a burden of carrying 30% for Malays, is stymieing their investment, which is correct. So they're trying to get out of it by saying, okay, we'll have Iskandar region, 3 times the size of Singapore, and there it does not apply. And that's an enormous hullabaloo. You're selling out to Singapore. They're not selling out to Singapore. They're selling out to the world and say, please come, help me develop. I think if I may ask the press, because there's a transition going on in Malaysia, I don't want to engage in this debate, but we're watching it with a certain anxiety to see how it eventually plays out. The optimistic scenario for the region is China, Japan gets on with Korea, and they are holding trilateral meetings on their own and helping each other financially, which is a new development. The Chinese and Japanese have decided, okay, we help the Koreans and we form a good bloc in Northeast Asia. That's a healthy development for the 3 of them. In other words, Japan is reinsuring economically, not in security terms, with China and Korea. And of course with ASEAN, but ASEAN is not such a big market for the Japanese. The big market is China and Korea. The optimistic scenario is that they are doing well. India also cooperating in trade and other economic areas, and we are bound to prosper. We can prosper and prosper well. The not pessimistic scenario is the ASEAN Economic Community is just a name. People are dragging their feet. It never comes fully into effect. And each ASEAN country is more linked up with big economic powers than with each other, to the disbenefit of all the ASEAN 10. When will logic and reason bring about the result? I don't know. I think it takes some time. But the thinking leaders know that that is the end result. It's good for them. It may be difficult for their industries which are being protected, but open competition will increase the economic pie for everybody. What is the end result? I think, again, somewhere in between. Now comes the question, what will Singaporeans be like in 25 years' time? That's a different question altogether. We are not reproducing ourselves. Our fertility rate is 1.29 in spite of all the bonuses and kindergartens, nurseries, and so on. We have moved in one generation from old-type society where women were housekeepers and bearers of children and rearing them up to one where women have second incomes, fully educated, fully independent, and sometimes earning more than the men, and men sometimes have wives earning more than them. And not an unhappy situation for the men. I was one of them. If my wife wasn't earning more than me, I couldn't have carried on as a prime minister with $3,500 a month for years and years. But I was freed from any worries about my children and their education because she was making 10 times, 15 times what I was making as a lawyer. But it brings about certain other changes. Women marry later, in their 30s, and 30% don't marry at all. Why? I don't know. Maybe they raise their standards too high. Say, all these are uninteresting men. I'll have a dull life. And Singapore men are crude, not lacks their courtesy, etc. And 33+% of Singapore men graduates also don't marry. I don't know why. They're happy now with singlehood. So you form relationships. And relationships carries no burden, you see. I see. We're happy, we cohabit. We're unhappy, but goodbye. We start another one. Is that good for society? I don't think so, but we are in this, and so the Chinese societies of Hong Kong and Taiwan, because they also educated the women. And in China, in the cities, the same thing is happening. Even in Japan, the women are not marrying. Why should I be a slave to my husband and my mother and father-in-law? This creates a problem for us, and without new citizens and permanent residents, we are going to be like the last of the Mohicans. We will disappear. Now, aged people and 2 people will have to support 2 aged people. How are you going to run this society? Unfortunately, our standard of living, our quality of life, compared to China, India, and the region, is such that we can get a stream of people of quality to join us. But of course, it creates problems for us.
Take a seat.